All right, everyone. Welcome back to the GDFL podcast. It's hosted by yours truly, the Commissioner Andrew Korn. With me today, I have Levi. Say hello to the world, Levi.
Hi, boys. Always a pleasure.
hmm Put us on the screen here. And so this week, I think, was a pretty pivotal week in the GDFL in terms of separating some contenders from pretenders. And I have the list of matchups up here, starting at the top. I beat Trevor in a not so close matchup. No shock there. Same thing with Stun over Logan. And again, not too much of a shocker there. One matchup, I think this was important for Sokol, was his matchup with you, Levi. He beat you about 108 to 80. You want to talk through that one at all?
I just think it's pivotal for him because it not only puts him one step closer to getting in the playoffs. Me and him are competing for that spot, and he took me one step back. So hats off to Sokol. That's a pivotal win for him.
hmm And then the other 4 and 5 team that had a much needed win was Barbara against Chaz. Barbara won about 138 to 100. And again, for similar reasons, Barbara needed this pretty much a must win to stay within 4 and 5 and stay within that last playoff spot. And then there's also a pretty big loss for Chaz as Chaz went from first to third, maybe even fourth. I have to double check the standings after that loss. And then two more I want to group together are Mark beat Jake 152 to 130. I think that just about puts a dagger in Jake's season. I mean, he still could turn around, but he probably has to run the table to make the playoffs now. And then same with Ryan with a 153 to 113 win over Beans. Then puts Ryan at 6-3 and probably not quite safely in the playoffs yet, but pretty damn close. And yeah, Beans at 3-6 was probably a dagger in his season. So any of these matchups just went over that you want to talk about?
Not really. Like you said, the playoff race is getting deep between myself, Shrew, and Sokol. I would not even count out Jake or Beans yet, but I don't feel good about their chances. But I
Mm-hmm.
was saying that about Shrew and Sokol last week, and I have the same record as both of them now.
Yep. Yeah, you just any given Sunday, you just never know what'll happen in fantasy. And so, yeah, taking a look at the standings, I think the biggest faller was Mark went or not Mark. Chaz went from first to fourth, falling behind Mark by about 20 points as the tiebreaker. And then Barbara jumped you in the standings from I don't know where Barbara was, but you followed seventh, and sure now is the tiebreaker over you. I'm just like looking at this. Yeah, Logan and Trevor still at the bottom there. Like, I mean, I think the points tiebreakers are still close enough between pretty much all these teams that it could still go anyway rest of the season.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, the biggest faller was Chaz going from first to fourth. And then looking at the race for the number one pick, Trevor's the lead shrunk a little bit this past week. Logan crept in a little, is a little bit closer now. Not that Logan has this pick, it belongs to Ryan. Um, I mean, Jake is also crept in a little bit closer. Sokol scored a few more points. Um, but yeah, I think the number one pick still belongs to Trevor, and then it's a pretty tight race between through four right now. But again, neither Logan or Jake own those picks, so doesn't do them any good if they lose. Oh, I guess one more I want to point out. It's not the max points for doesn't matter, but Stun is now second overall, but is like eighth in scoring, which apparently Stun's not very good side in the lineup, but he's 7-2, so something's going right for Stun.
Sometimes it just goes your way.
Yeah, sometimes the cookie just crumbles your way. So we have a few trades that have been happening this week. This is the big one was Ramondre in a 27 second round pick from Trevor was traded for Xavier Worthy in a 25 fourth. You want to talk us through this one, Levi?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just trying to make a push for playoffs. I'm still in the race, and I really like Xavier Worthy, but he is not helping me get any closer to breaking through and getting a top six spot. So I've always been a big Ramondre Stevenson fan. I've been trying for a long time to get him from Trevor, and the second really evened the deal out for me. So really hard to give up on Worthy, but I already have a Chief long term, and Ramondre helps me much more this season.
Mhm. Yeah, no,
Good
that.
for Trevor, though. I think Worthy's a great add on a rebuilding team.
Oh, absolutely. No, if you look at Trevor's wide receiver room now, he has Malik Neighbors, Xavier Worthy, Xavier Legette, and Ricky Pearsall. That's four first round rookies from this past NFL draft that he now has on his dynasty team. And then again, yeah, like you said, he's had a pretty up and down rookie season. He's had a few pretty big spike weeks, but he's also had a few pretty big negative weeks too, where he's been done not just about nothing. So I think that's probably the kind of player he will be. I think he's very much like a JMO type, where you'll have those spike weeks and like those league winning weeks, but then also you gotta just brace yourself. He might put up some zeros, but
Mhm.
such is life with a player like that. But yeah, no, I really like this for both sides. I mean, Trevor's taking another chance on a young receiver, and then yeah, who knows how he ends up. And then, like you said, you got another push or another piece to help you push towards the playoffs. So no, I think this is one I like for both sides. And then, yeah, you gain the second back on top of it too. Helps you restock the cupboard of your draft capital a little bit too.
Absolutely.
And then this was one that I saw come in earlier today between you and Stun. It was Romeo Dobbs in a 2027 fourth for Kendra Miller in a 2027 third. Hey, you want to talk us through this one?
Kind of similar as the last one. Just I really liked the prospect Kendre Miller when he was a rookie. Things have not gone well for him in New Orleans, but I've really it's sounding a little bit more and more like Dennis Allen really just kept him in the doghouse. I don't know. We'll see. I do like Romeo Dobbs, but to upgrade a pick and take a prospect I like, it kind of just outweighed it for me. I sent Stun three different options to get Kendre Miller just to see what he'd budge on. And this was the best one for him, I thought. So good on him. I think he was probably getting sick of Kendre Miller. We'll see if it works out or not. But for me to move up around was worth the payoff, whether it works out or not.
Okay. Yeah, I know Stun. I mean, he's texted me several times since that draft has happened about how much he fumbled all the running backs he took. So I'm not too shocked if he, like you mentioned earlier, he just wants to get rid of Kendra and just get him off the roster, stop thinking about it. Yeah, your reasoning makes sense to me. I mean, I guess this is an example of like Stun like the value and he's just gonna accept it. I mean, he really didn't need another receiver. And like I mean, he just has Romeo Dobbs now, which I mean, I guess another player he could trade away later. I'm not sure how often Romeo Dobbs is cracking that lineup. I'd have to really take a look at Stun's receivers to like really have a good opinion on that. But I mean, I think he's like Stun's like wide receiver like 6 or 7 off the top of my head. So yeah, I mean, in terms of value, I mean, I think like you said, I think Romeo Dobbs. I mean, with the way the draft capital is traded here, Romeo Dobbs is seen as the better player. But you got the pick with Kendra Miller, and you said you like Kendra Miller prospect, and I'm always a believer in get your guys. And if Kendra Miller's your guy, hey, he's your guy. Now, something I did see that was interesting about Kendra Miller earlier today was that like they placed him in injured reserve with a pretty minor injury, and again, that's going back to the whole doghouse thing. Uh, Again, he was apparently in Dennis Allen's doghouse, and like I don't know, I've never heard a Dennis Allen quote that was ever anything good about Kendra Miller. It was always like he's got to learn, he's got to do X, Y, Z. Yeah, apparently they just did not get along, but yeah, we'll see. Maybe the new regime or maybe the rest of the coaching staff this year see something different in him.
I will say this is not an indictment on Romeo Dobbs by me by any means. I think he's firmly entrenched as their wide receiver too. I think he's severely underrated in the dynasty landscape. So good pickup for Stun.
Mm-hmm. No, I would agree. I think he's their wide receiver too. Like I think of like their Packers receivers. I mean, I think Reed is the obvious number one. I mean, he's a good slot receiver, but they also just find ways to get him ball with like rushes and stuff too. And then Christian Watson is kind of like their vertical threat, very boom bust. Like he's kind of like the Gabe Davis of that offense. Is kind of how I pictured like view him. And then Wicks is kind of jack of all trades, and then they kind of plug and play him whenever there's injuries to everyone else. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, and normally I don't bring up waiver claims, but when someone bids $98 on a player, I think it's worth bringing up. So Stun won the Cooper Rush sweepstakes. I think both Stun and Mark had him like within the past like 3 weeks or so, have added and then dropped him. Very similar thing happened last year. I think I dropped Jake Browning like 4 days before Burrow's injury, and then Ryan was able to pick him up. But yeah, Stun picking up Cooper Rush was pretty big, and it's especially big since I don't think Trevor Lawrence is playing this week. And the rumors are that I've seen is that he might be having surgery on his non-throwing shoulder. It sounds very similar to the injury Baker had in Cleveland. And so Lawrence might be done for the season. I mean, there's nothing confirmed yet as of this is we're recording this, say it's Thursday at 4:30. But this is I think, a very important pickup for Stun. I mean, he had the fab and really a starting quarterback's about as good as it's going to get on waivers in this league. But Cooper Rush is probably going to be in a starting lineup indefinitely. Depends on how long T-Law's out, if whether it's for this whole season or it might even just be this week. But yeah, I think that was ended up being a really good pickup for Stun. And I mean, I think pretty much everyone who bid put the max bid out there for him.
So Cooper Rush's parents come up north, like to Travers to vacation often, and they go to the bar I work at like 3 times a year. We saw them 2 weeks ago, and they really confirmed Cooper Rush is well loved in Dallas. I don't think there's any chance Trey Lance starts over him, which
Mm-hmm.
probably seems obvious, but Cooper Rush is a great backup.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, Cooper Rush allowed him to a 5-1 record 2 years ago when Dak was injured. And yeah, I mean, CMU alum, not that that really matters, but yeah, I mean, Trey Lance, if he was any good, he would have been the backup all season. I mean, the fact that he's been QB3 for like the past 2 years now, I think is a bit of an indictment on Trey Lance. I mean, I think I mean, if Rush gets injured, obviously Lance would play. Or if the Cowboys season like really goes to the shitter, like I could see Trey Lance getting some starts at the end of the year, like the last like 3-4 weeks, if the Cowboys are truly out of it. But yeah, I mean, I think Rush is he's going to start. I'm not. So again, Dak's injury is something I was going to bring up on the show. I'm not sure Dak's going to come back this year. I mean, listening to the description of his hamstring injury, so it sounds like this hamstring like came off the bone. I mean, I'm not very familiar with hamstrings. Maybe that didn't sound correct, but his injury sounded pretty like a pretty serious hamstring injury. And like at least for like receivers, it's usually around 4 to 6 weeks it takes for them to come back. So then 4 to 6 weeks. I mean, this is about to be week 10. So we're looking weeks 14 to 16. The Cowboy season's not going well. They might just pack it up and save them for next year. That really wouldn't shock me in the slightest. So, I mean, that's something that, I mean, obviously hurts my team since Dak was my QB2. That's why I make a trade for Jameis Winston last week is just wanted to have some extra insurance. And so Aaron Rodgers is going to be a starter for me and Cannon here for the near future. I think Kyler, Jameis, and Rodgers all have buys like the next 3 weeks consecutively. So pretty good for me to have Jameis Winston to help cover those buys now that, I mean, I'm not banking on having Dak the rest of the season. And also, I really like that Desmond Ritter pickup, Levi. I mean, he did play at the end of that Raiders game last week, and there's a non-zero chance that he starts the next game for him. They're on a bye this week, so who knows? But I think it was a pretty savvy move. I mean, and again, there's not much on waivers, but in terms of a speculative ad, I really like seeing you pick up Ritter.
I have a man crush on Ritter. I have since he's been a rookie. So any chance that there is that he'll start, I'm going to spend the money and try and get him.
So I think that was a pretty good use of Fab.
Thank you.
And then taking a look at some of the upcoming matchups for this week. So I'm playing against Beans. Again, we talked about it earlier. Beans' season's probably over. And then I mean, I'd like to say I hopefully will win, but I'm not going to count anyone out. Anything can still happen. I don't think I'd taken Nico Collins out of my lineup yet with this projection, so I think my projection might go up a little bit. Not the projections really mean a ton, but yeah, I think I would pick myself over Beans here. One that I'm particularly interested, there's a couple here actually, but Sokol and Ryan this upcoming week, I think is a particularly interesting matchup. I mean, projections have it as being a pretty close to a 50-50. Again, Sokol has to win to like keep the season alive, and a win for Sokol and a loss for Ryan actually makes things pretty interesting in the playoff picture. Because I think that would put Sokol only a game behind Ryan with 4 weeks left to go, and anything can happen those last 4 weeks. I mean, I think Ryan's probably only a win or two away from making the playoffs, but I mean, Sokol's not an easy matchup for him. And then after that, we have Mark versus Stun. This one's going to be pretty big for the playoff seeding. Mark's a pretty big favorite. I'm wondering if Sean's updated his lineup yet. But yeah, Sleeper seems to think Mark's going to win that one. And again, like I said, I think they're the 2-3 seeds right now, or the 2 and the 3 seed. So win by Mark might even vault him up to the 1 if I lose. But yeah,
Yeah,
it's might be
that's the prime time game.
yeah. This is the Sunday night showdown of Stun versus Mark here. Next one we have is Barb taking on Jake. The projections for that one are pretty tight. Looks like it's going to be pretty close to 50-50. Again, kind of a must win for both of them. Barb loses this one, might be hard to recover. I mean, Jake loses and his season's all but over because then he'll be 3-7. Best he can hope for is a 7-7 record after that. Yeah, I think these two are pretty big on the rivalry tracker we did in the beginning of the season. I don't remember the exact results. But I know those two. There's no love lost between Jake and Shrew in terms of fantasy. And then I'm going to skip around to the one on the bottom here with you taking on Chaz. Your matchup's projected to be fairly close right now. And again, Chaz takes a pretty big hit with CeeDee Lamb, I think, with Cooper Rush starting. I was looking at some data of like how Lamb was playing in Cooper Rush's previous starts, and it really wasn't horrible. But like, I don't think the ceiling is quite as high with Cooper Rush as it would have been with Dak starting. So I mean, a little bit of a lucky break for you there, Levi.
He also has some bye week trouble. I think Jaden Reed, Gino, and Ken Walker are out on bye.
Okay, yeah, that's all the more that would help you then. Heck yeah, none of those guys are playing this week, so I heard the Packer. Yeah, Packers are on a bye. Some that sounds right. Yeah, I mean, best of luck to you on your matchup with Chaz this week. And again, another pretty big one for the playoff picture here. And then one that's really not going to matter at all is Logan versus Trevor. Battle of the bottom dwellers. Don't think this matchup's going to mean anything at all other than pride. Both teams are the only two teams projected under 100 and 110 even. It's supposed to be 92 to 95. So a big old toilet bowl matchup. Don't think it's going to matter at all, but just want to call it out. And then here's our special segment for this episode. So Levi and I are going to play a game of Would You Rather, and then we're going to go through I made a list of 10 Would You Rathers, and Levi did 5. And then we're just going to do a little brief discussion on each one of which player we'd rather have and why. I have them sorted by position, so we'll go through quarterbacks, then running backs, and receivers and tight ends. And without further ado, the first would you rather I have on here is who would you rather have between CJ Stroud and Patrick Mahomes? Levi, which one would you rather have?
I think I'm going to say CJ Stroud. You don't really have to factor in rushing with either of these guys. I do not think Patrick Mahomes is a lost cause based on this season by any stretch. If I were Mark, I would not be worried at all. But just between these two, it's pretty much strictly based on age, and I'm going to go Stroud.
Yeah, I mean, I don't blame you there. I think I had a talking point. I'm pretty sure this week for Mahomes was his first week as a top 12 quarterback since week 10 of last season. Like a literal full calendar year has gone by since Mahomes was last a top 12 quarterback any given week in fantasy. Stroud, I think, has only had 2 top 12 weeks this year, so it's not been much better. I mean, this was meant to be hard. I think if we were in a startup and I had to pick one, I'd probably take Mahomes over Stroud, but difference is pretty razor thin, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so the next one, we have 2 of Chaz's quarterbacks. So we have Sam Darnold and Geno Smith. Which one would you rather have, Levi?
I think I'm going to go with Geno. This is just as difficult, if not more. The easy cop out is, well, if I'm rebuilding, I want Darnold. If I'm competitive, I want Geno. I'm not going to do that. But Geno has at least shown it regularly. And it's not that Darnold's bad. They're going to go to McCarthy in the next 2 years. We don't know what's next for Darnold. I just think Geno's the safer option, and I'd rather take Geno in that situation.
Yeah, I think I would take Geno too for a dynasty league. I think if we were doing strictly this year, I'd actually take Darnold over Geno, just because the way Darnold's been I think Darnold's been playing as a top 10 quarterback. If we were to like look at on a per game basis, I'd have to pull up the actual numbers. I mean, again, it's close, but again, Geno's like contract security probably like has me favor that side a little bit, but they're pretty similar to me. But this was the one I came up with and thought was pretty interesting. Up next, we have JJ McCarthy or Michael Penix.
I really liked Penix, the prospect. I came up with this one, the quarterbacks we haven't seen yet.
Mhm.
I don't think you can go wrong at this point in the game. I just prefer Penix's the situation, which you could argue one way or the other. Um, I just like what they've got going on in Atlanta. I think he's kind of bound to get a start next year. That's my hot take. So I'm gonna go Penix.
Okay. Yeah, I'd actually, for me, I think it's JJ, and I don't know if it's particularly close. I mean, I'm pretty high on JJ. That's a big reason why I had no issue trading for Jefferson this summer. Was I really wasn't worried about Jefferson catching passes from McCarthy. I was pretty high on JJ the prospect. Like he was pretty close to Drake May for me. I had him about even. And then a gun in my head, I might have even taken JJ over Drake May. Again, might have maybe a hot take, maybe not. We'll find out next year when JJ probably gets some playing time. But a lot of it for me is Kevin O'Connell is a coach I view quite highly. I think he's one of the best play callers in football. And he has, again, Jefferson, Addison, Hawkinson is one of the best receiver rooms you can throw to. I mean, you can say the same with Penix, with London, Pitts, and Mooney, and that's also a very strong room of players to be thrown to. I think both of them are in great situations for the future. Penix's injury history concerns me a little bit more than what JJ has had, even though JJ is injured now. But yeah, I think I would favor JJ a little bit just because I think he has a little bit more rushing upside, and I like the offense he'll be in a little bit more next year and as head coach. But I think it's fairly close too. Okay, up next, this is a fun one. We have Anthony Richardson and Justin Fields. I think Levi, your exact note was garbage quarterbacks who have like rushing upside. Uh, this is a fun one. What were your thoughts here?
I mean, I'm biased, and we haven't seen as much Anthony Richardson. We've seen Justin Fields do this his whole career. I'm going to go AR. I'm having a hard time believing he's really not going to play again this season, even. But even like next year, and you could say the same thing about Justin Fields. It's almost guaranteed he's the future of the Steelers organization. But I'm going to go AR, shoot that shot. He's a little younger, just seems to have a few more chances ahead of him than Fields. And I do like the situation in Indy. Maybe not today in the short term. There's a lot going on that's going wrong for them right now, but long term, I do like AR's situation better.
Yeah, this was one when I saw this, it's like, oh man, I'd have no idea what I'm gonna pick for this one, just because like I could talk myself into picking either. Because like Fields as a fantasy quarterback has like shown like he can be a QB1. I mean, he helped carry Logan to a championship the first year of our dynasty league. Anthony Richardson, the first like 5 starts of his career has put up insane fantasy numbers. Then like the last 5 he had were just not particularly good. So it's like there's still some of that like you mentioned, there's still some mystery box element with Anthony Richardson. We don't really know how good he could end up being. Um, yeah, if we were picking today, I think I'd probably lean Fields slightly, but that's not with like much conviction. Again, I could talk myself into either. I've just like Fields has played a little bit better in his career to this point, not a ton. So I don't think very highly of Fields as a passer. But I mean, if Richardson will probably hopefully get another shot in Indianapolis by the end of the season to see if whatever he was working through can figure it out. But this was a really fascinating one that I think you suggested. I really like this one. And then we have this one, which is Tua or Geno Smith. At least for me personally, I think I would still go with Tua, and most of that's just related to his contract. Like he just signed. I mean, what's the equivalent of a max in the NFL? He's going to be there for the next 5 years, whether he's good or not. That injury, the concussion history, does concern me. But I guess their weapons probably aren't even all that different either. I mean, Tyreek and Waddle are pretty solid, are really both really good. but so is DK and JSN. But I think just in terms of like age and contract, I would lean Tua, but I'm curious how much your thoughts are here.
I try to go with ceiling. So I stole this one from a channel I was watching today, or yesterday, and I couldn't tell you what channel it was. I'd love to cite my source, drawing a blank, but actually the three guys talking about it all preferred Geno, which sort of blew my mind. I would prefer Tua. I get that he might not play past 30, and he's got all the health concerns, but he is coming back. And at no point did he ever really seem like he was considering not coming back. And we have seen that he is the straw that stirs the drink there since he's been out. So to me, this one was just fascinating. I'll be curious to hear what our other league mates have to say about it because I could not believe three people could sit down and look at this and say they would prefer Geno over Tua. Granted, Geno's safe, don't get me wrong, but I just don't care. I'd prefer Tua.
Yeah, when you okay, that the added context makes a little more sense because yeah, when I saw this, I was like, oh, this feels like it's definitely Tua. That's fascinating though. That
Yeah.
okay, now we're moving on to running backs. So this one is the two running backs taken in sixth and 12th overall last year with Bijan Robinson and Jameer Gibbs. Levi, who would you prefer?
Yeah, I'm gonna go Gibbs because I'm a homer, but also because the duo of Gibbs and Montgomery seems to work better for fantasy purposes than Bijan. And I don't know if you call it a duo of Bijan and Algier, but they're definitely not as effective for fantasy purposes when compared to Gibbs and Monty. And Gibbs and Monty don't eat into each other's workload. Um, like I said, I'm a homer, but also Gibbs has a little more pass catching promise than Bijan. So yeah, I'm pretty sold on Gibbs here. I don't think you can go wrong either way.
Yeah, I'm with you where you can't really go wrong either way. I could tell myself a story where I'd prefer one over the other. Like Bijan, it seems like he's going to have more control of that backfield to himself in his career, where Gibbs is going to be tied with Monty for the next like 3, 4 years. So there's going to be some like limit to Gibbs's like full upside and versus like someone who's an every down back. But I guess you could also spin it the other way. If Monty ever gets hurt, the upside Gibbs is going to have is going to be through the roof with the way the Lions offensive line looks right now.
Mm-hmm.
I again, the homer pick, I think I would take Gibbs, but like I think we're pulling hairs here in terms of like who I'd actually prefer. It's really hard for me to say what I would do if I were actually forced to make the pick today, but I think I'd just do slight Gibbs lean because of the Lions. This is a fun one. So we have Travis Etienne and Tank Bigsby. You had suggested this one. The Jacksonville offense right now is absolutely nothing I want to be investing a ton into, other than like Brian Thomas and I guess T Law. I'm a pretty big T Law guy, but
Yeah.
yeah, their running back has been a committee all season, and ETN has been frustrating as all hell to play. I think Bigsby's had a few pretty good weeks and seems to be the better rusher, but Bigsby just doesn't play passing downs at all. Like, if Bigsby's come in, he's pretty much going to be running the ball because he's a pretty atrocious pass blocker and receiver. I'd probably still go. I mean, again, I'm going to be a little biased. I'd probably lean ETN because I still think he has a little bit more pass catching upside, and he was the RB like 2 or 3 last year. Maybe, or maybe even been 4. I can't remember. He was a top 5 running back last year. I'd lean ETN just because I think his ceiling's a little bit higher as being a pass catcher. But yeah, these two are fucking gross right now.
Pretty much the same opinion as yours. I was not a Tank Bigsby guy when he was drafted. I wasn't his rookie year. No one was. ETN has shown it. ETN has, like you said, been a top 5 back before. I have seen a lot of things suggesting he might get traded. My big issue is where would he get traded to? I don't think the Cowboys feel the need to get a win now running back, and that's the only team that comes to mind for me. I still prefer ETN. Tank Bigsby seems. I would almost compare Tank Bigsby to like what Javonte Williams has been this season, where he can run the ball, he can do a lot of running the ball, but he's probably not going to eclipse more than 10 points a game regularly. So ETN for me.
Yeah, and I like Tank Bigsby is like a Gus Edwards type, where like it's going to be pretty gross if like whatever fantasy production he's getting is gross, but it does come. All right, so this is a fun one. Is Josh Jacobs or Isaiah Pacheco? Who are you leaning here, Levi?
That's pretty hard. I'm gonna let recency bias get me on this one and go with Josh Jacobs. I don't think Pacheco's gonna come back and suck, right? I think he's fine and stable there as the Chiefs running back. Josh Jacobs is doing well in Green Bay. His contract is not super secure, but for this season, I think he's definitely a safe option for this season, but he could be in Green Bay for 2 more years. And if that does happen, if they choose to keep him, they're keeping him to play him. And if he's playing, he's getting points. So I'm gonna go Jacobs.
Yeah, no, like I said, they're playing him and they're running him into the ground. I'm actually think I'm going to lean Pacheco. So I mean, again, both of their contracts, like I think Pacheco has one more year left on his deal, and he's a free agent. At least for me with Pacheco, like the way Kareem Hunt's been scoring touchdowns in that offense has been at least encouraging for a player like Pacheco for when he comes back. I really don't think Kareem Hunt is very good. It's more so that he just knows the Chiefs system and then has gotten all the goal line work. So just like seeing the way Kareem Hunt has played, I'd probably lean Pacheco, and I could be swayed either way though. Like I mean, I don't really want to take a Packer either. Like fuck Josh Jacobs,
Ooh.
fuck the Packers. But no, this was one I thought would have been pretty interesting because again, I think they're probably valued similarly and like don't have a ton of contract security after this year or next year. Next one we have is DeAndre Swift or J.K. Dobbins. I personally would lean Swift. Just again, he doesn't torn his ACL and ruptured his Achilles. That's really the only reason why. But what about you, Levi?
I think I'm gonna go Swift. They're pretty dead set even for me. Dobbins has been a pleasant surprise. I didn't think he was going to do anything this year or in the future, but I do think Dobbins will get a contract, at least a 2 year deal, whether it's in with the Chargers or another team this offseason. Swift just already has the 3 year deal, and there aren't any option years on it. I know Swift's contract is pretty secure, and it does seem like they're figuring things out in Chicago. Hate to pick the bear, and I'm really 50-50 here, but I'm going to go Swift just because there's a little more security.
Mm-hmm. All right, next one we move to receivers, and we're gonna have to start going a little faster. We're almost on time with the Zoom. So we have Jamar Chase or Malik Neighbors. I think I would lean Chase just because he's tied to Burrow. But again, this one's pretty close for me. If Neighbors had a better quarterback, then I would probably pick Neighbors. What about you, Levi?
Same idea as you. Chase, nothing wrong with Neighbors. Real 50-50 split. Chase is just in the prime of his career and tied to Burrow.
Yep. All right, so next we have our receivers. We have Nico Collins and AJ Brown. I'm gonna pick Nico Collins just because he's tied to CJ Stroud for the next 4 years, and I just love his athleticism. I think the way he was playing at the beginning of this year was pretty special, and looks to be like he's gonna be Stroud's go-to guy for the next like 3-4 years here. How about you, Levi?
I love my boy AJ Brown, but I'm in the same boat as you. He's another guy that seems to be the key to unlocking the Texans offense. When he's not playing, they're not nearly as good. Nothing wrong with Brown. He's just a little older. Eagles are a little less reliant on this receiver. So I'll go Texans, Nico Collins.
All right. We have Devontae Smith and DK Metcalf. This was one where I love Devontae Smith. I also really like DK Metcalf. Both of them are receivers I like quite a bit. I think in the redraft league, I took DK over Devontae Smith. And so for that reason, I'll say DK. Um, if Devontae Smith was ever the receiver, number one receiver on his own team, I would absolutely take him, but that's just not going to happen in the near future. So I would lean DK here, but it's splitting hairs for me.
I'm not just agreeing with you a bunch to move it along. I would take DK too, though. I just feel like there's a little higher ceiling with DK. The floor seems about the same, and I really like the heavy set receivers that can run right through you. So DK for me too.
Mm-hmm. All right, so this was one Brandon Ayuk or Josh Downs. Ayuk's interesting coming off that he has a pretty massive ACL injury. Has been great for like 3 of his 5 years in the NFL, but has been pretty shitty the other two. Downs is starting to look like a pretty reliable receiver for the Colts. This was one if I were making this choice in a draft, I would really struggle with who I'd want. I might actually lean Downs. I think he might be a PPR machine moving forward. What about you, Levi?
I've watched a lot of Colts football this year. I'm going to say Josh Downs, and it's not particularly close for me. I know Ayuk has had some good seasons, but things were not, the train was not even on the tracks when he was playing. And now that he's hurt, uh, I hate to say it for Barbara's sake, but that's starting to look like some sunk cost. So Downs gets the thumbs up for me as well.
All right, I think we have two more of these left. So we have tight end. We have Trey McBride or Dalton Kincaid. At least for me, this is a pretty easy McBride. I think McBride is I think he's tight end 3 right now, and Dalton Kincaid's tight end 12. And they're about the same age. Kincaid's tied to the better quarterback, but I don't really know if he's ever going to be anything special at the position. If he hasn't really shown it quite yet, where McBride has looked like a pretty big difference making tight end. And he hasn't even scored any touchdowns, receiving touchdowns this year, and he's tight end 3.
Oh,
So I'm leaning McBride, but I want to see what your take was.
I'm right there with you. I'm very, very biased towards McBride. I lived in Colorado when he was at CSU. They loved him there. Saw a lot of highlight plays. He's kind of like a fullback playing tight end, even though they're pretty similar positions. You get the ball in his hands and he just goes, goes, goes. So McBride for me too.
All right, and then this is the last one I have here, which is Kyle Pitts or George Kittle. This is an interesting one because I mean Kittle's by far tight end 1 right now, and Pitts has been kind of up and down his career, but he's had a pretty big resurgence season here with Falcons. Again, the cop out answer is to say Kittle on a contender, Pitts on a rebuilder, but I still might. I'm just going to take Kittle outright. I mean, Kittle's been that much of a difference making tight end this year, where he's really 1 of 1 at the position right now. Like he's that much further ahead than everyone else. So I'm going to take Kittle.
How much time do we have?
We have 2 minutes.
So at heart, I would take Kittle, but for argument's sake, I'm going to take Pitts and just say, hey, he's younger, seems to be figuring it out this year, has the profile. I personally cannot fucking stand Kyle Pitts. He really burned me in the first season. I took him 11th overall in the startup. Very, very bad pick. But if he's figuring it out, tight ends seem to have a very long shelf life, at least to 32, it seems.
Mhm.
Um, so I'll go Pitts for the sake of ending on a disagreement.
Yeah, I mean, again in terms of like pure dynasty value, I could definitely see the case for Pitts. Kittle's my boy. It's like he's always been my boy. I have his jersey. I can't wear it anymore because I hate the 49ers now. But
Mhm.
there's still a special place in my heart for George Kittle. I've had several teams named Kittle Corn over the years. And so we have about a minute left. Levi, you have any closing thoughts you want to get out this week?
Not really. While I'm here, I'll just advertise I'm a bit more open to moving Rashi Rice as I'm trying to make my playoff push. So if I'm going to take the time to do the podcast, I'm going to do a little self advertisement there. And I really hope that Shrew and Sokol lose.
All right, you heard it here first. Levi hopes Sure and Sokol loses. I'll do a little advertisement for myself too. I was gonna like try and get a better flex for my lineup, but the way Hopkins looks with the Chiefs, that's not gonna be the case. But I'm still gonna be open to trading for another flex type player just to have some like depth moving forward for the playoffs. Maybe willing to give up my first, depending on the player if the deal is right. But anything's possible. I'm just kind of looking to add some depth to my lineup for the playoffs. But with that, go Lions. We're gonna fuck up the Texans on Sunday night this week.
Go
And
Lions, man.
yeah, go Lions. Jared Goff for MVP. And with that, I will see you all later.